Eric Forrester had always believed that every great design began with negative space, the quiet stretch where imagination breathed before silk met sketch. And in that same spirit he finally recognized the deafening absence swallowing his son's life. Joy, genuine and unscripted, had vanished from Ridge's eyes the moment he knotted himself to duty instead of desire. Watching Ridge oscillate between Brooke and Taylor over decades had been like watching a masterpiece repainted until the canvas bulged with regret. But in Rome, when Eric stood at the back of the Grand Salon and witnessed Ridge sneak glances at Brooke, glances full of wistfulness, even as Taylor clutched his arm, he understood that the architect of all their happiness was still Brooke Logan, the muse who once turned a fledgling couture house into legend. Eric resolved, with patriarchal persistence and a tailor's precision, to separate loyalty from love in Ridge's distracted mind. He began subtly, inviting Brooke to informal breakfasts on the Forrester terrace where Ridge would accidentally arrive to discuss a collar roll or hem pinch, only to find Brooke radiant in morning light, laughing with Eric about a memory Ridge and she alone shared. Each encounter planted a seed. Ridge's shoulders straightened, his voice warmed, and Taylor, busy interpreting every sigh as satisfaction, failed to see the distance widening beneath their feet. Steffy, however, sensed the shift like barometric pressure before a flash flood. Because she had spent months manipulating guilt, weaving her father's sense of family preservation into a tether anchoring him to Taylor, she redoubled efforts once Brooke's name began surfacing in Ridge's anecdotes. She reminded Ridge daily how fragile Taylor's heart had once been, how near a bullet had come to shattering their future, how happiness meant constancy for the grandchildren. She orchestrated lunches at Il Giardino featuring childhood photo montages and even had Amelia deliver voicemails from the kids squealing about Nana Taylor and Papa Ridge, all to tangle devotion with duty. Ridge, ever susceptible to emotion disguised as logic, wavered between gratitude and restlessness until Eric decided subtlety had expired. He summoned Ridge to the Forrester guest house where an easel stood shrouded by muslin. With the authority of both father and founder, he unveiled a triptych. 3 oil portraits of Ridge's life, one with Taylor at the Aspen Chapel, one alone during the dark self-exile after Phoebe's death, and one luminous panel of Ridge and Brooke laughing at the Italian fountain, paint still wet as though their love refused to fully dry. Eric asked which face looked most alive. Ridge tried to answer diplomatically, but the tremor in his voice betrayed truth. He named Brooke. Sensing the dam cracking, Eric pressed. If an artist returns repeatedly to one muse across 40 years, perhaps destiny has rendered its verdict. Ridge, shaken, left before dawn for Malibu, where Taylor greeted him in a cashmere wrap the color of calm seas. He planned to confess his confusion, but Steffi sat beside her mother, offering pastries and stories of the kids, guilt coiled around his throat, the same guilt Steffi fed daily. He smoothed Taylor's hair, whispered a promise to finalize plans for their recommitment ceremony, then drove the winding PCH feeling like a coward. Meanwhile, Brooke, unaware of Eric's midnight intervention, focused on a new fragrance line, hoping obsession with floral-based notes might anesthetize longing. Yet destiny rarely respects schedules. That afternoon, Ridge arrived at Forrester Creations for a design review where Brooke stood beside a mannequin draped in bias-cut chantilly embroidered with crescent moons, her tribute to nights beneath the Roman sky. The seamstress accidentally snagged the hem, and Brooke, kneeling to inspect damage, glanced up to find Ridge's gaze molten with something more volcanic than nostalgia. The air thickened, even Thomas paused mid-pin. Steffi burst in, spied the lingering look, and clapped her hands too loudly, announcing she and Taylor had chosen a venue near the shore, subtly broadcasting commitment. Ridge blinked, tore his eyes away, and Brooke laughed too brightly before excusing herself. Steffi exhaled relief. She believed crisis averted, unaware Eric had already arranged the coup de grace, an intimate family dinner ostensibly to preview holiday sketches but intended as intervention. The evening unfolded in the Forrester courtyard where twinkle lights tangled with jasmine vines. Eric seated Brooke beside Ridge, Taylor opposite them, Steffi flanking her mother like a sentinel. As dessert arrived, RJ, Hope, and Donna slipped in, each sharing stories of Brooke's resilience, her capacity to forgive, her influence on the brand's soul. Eric then rose, tapped a crystal, and announced that from Florence to Los Angeles, Brooke had shepherded Forrester through triumph and turmoil and therefore deserved recognition as Creative Legacy Ambassador, a title that required close collaboration with Ridge on archival retrospectives. Taylor's smile froze. Steffi nearly dropped her spoon. Ridge remained silent, but his eyes glimmered with latent pride not only in Brooke's contribution but in Eric's audacity to honor it publicly. Later, alone on the balcony, Ridge found Brooke gazing at city lights. She thanked him for accepting her new role. He confessed her presence awakened parts of him he feared had atrophied. She replied destiny still glowed if one dared reopen shuttered windows. They almost kissed, but Brooke retreated, mindful of vows Ridge had sworn elsewhere. Over the next week, Ridge and Brooke pored through decades of sketchbooks. Each memory reopened laughter and longing. Every time Brooke traced a fingertip over a swatch, Ridge felt a tug toward the horizon he once called home. Guilt gnawed, but passion feasted. When Taylor surprised them with coffee one late evening, she saw the sparks snapping between them and her heart quaked. She confronted Steffi, demanding honesty about guilt tactics. Steffi admitted leveraging the children to anchor Ridge but justified it as protection. Taylor, a psychiatrist versed in manipulation, felt disgust and sorrow mingle. She had enabled this cycle by believing love demanded reinforcement. The revelation fractured her resolve. That night alone, she perused journals where she'd counseled patients to never cling to ambivalent affection, and realized she had violated her own doctrine. Depression seeped in like fog. Ridge returned home days later to find Taylor cradling framed photos with red-rimmed eyes. She asked whether he loved her enough to choose her freely, absent obligation. What answer could he give when his mind echoed with Brooke's laugh? He hesitated, and the silence detonated louder than any confession. Taylor released the frame, glass splintered, then whispered she needed air. She called Steffi, voice raw, and within hours mother and daughter packed suitcases, retreating to a remote beach house where waves could drown tears. Steffi lashed out at Ridge via voicemail, accusing him of emotional negligence. She drafted press releases citing research sabbatical for Taylor and personal leave for herself, effectively scripting Jacqueline McInnes Wood's maternity hiatus into storyline. In Malibu, gulls screeched while Taylor battled insomnia and Steffi curated therapeutic routines, sunrise yoga, salt spray walks, journals of gratitude. Yet each quiet hour Taylor's mind replayed decades of rivalry, and even a therapist's insight failed to staunch grief. Back in Beverly Hills, Ridge confessed to Eric that Taylor had left. Eric answered gently that love built on pity condemns everyone to poverty of spirit. He urged Ridge to claim the happiness standing an elevator ride away. Ridge drove to Brooke's estate under heavy twilight. She answered in silk loungewear, surprised, wary. He spoke of canvases that refused new paint, of gilt chains, of the simple truth that his pulse synced to hers before either knew the word destiny. Brooke, tears surfacing, asked whether he was truly free or merely lonely in Taylor's absence. Ridge knelt where proposals once failed, he now surrendered. He offered not a ring but his open palms, promising constancy, begging no timetable yet swearing no retreat. Brooke considered the labyrinth of history. Caroline, Barbuda, deserts, gondolas, annulments. She recalled vows broken when passion faltered, children whiplashed by resets. She demanded therapy together, boundaries, and public acknowledgement of culpability. Ridge agreed without blinking. They sealed the accord with a kiss that tasted of salt and surrender. The following morning, Ridge called Taylor first, voice trembling. He apologized without excuse, thanked her for years of solace, and wished her rediscovery of joy far from his turbulence. Taylor wept but recognized liberation disguised as heartbreak and said goodbye with grace. At Forrester Creations, Eric unveiled a new campaign, Endless Thread, celebrating legacies that refuse to unravel. Brooke and Ridge headlined press photos, hands entwined, while media buzzed about fate and forgiveness. Steffy, scrolling headlines on a windswept porch, felt anger flash then fade. Seeing her father finally decisive deflated her crusade. She turned to Taylor, sketching seashells in a journal, and realized healing sometimes means relinquishing the war. Months later, the beach house brimmed with newborn cries. Steffy's maternity story pivoted from exile to rebirth as she welcomed a daughter whose middle name honored Taylor's resilience. Ridge and Brooke, attending via video call, promised family reunion once Dr. cleared travel. In Los Angeles, Eric toasted the rarity of second, third, and 10th chances finally landing. He watched Ridge beam at Brooke and whispered to Stephanie's portrait that negative space had birthed a masterpiece after all, a love stitched by decades, ironed by pain, finally hemmed in permanence.